Welcome to the Tell Your Story workshop. During this workshop, we will explore the specific components of the P&T dossier that require narratives and guide you using storytelling techniques and actual examples of successful peer narratives to develop the draft of your own professional narratives. This workshop requires some reading of statement examples, notes on your own reflections, and some pair share interactions with your colleagues. We designed this workshop to be a launchpad for you to build the first draft of your professional narratives or improve on existing drafts. The present video lasts approximately 20 minutes and is designed as a pre-work to prepare you for the actual workshop, where you will be drafting different components of a P&T narrative and share with and learn from others. We made available all materials of the workshop in a Canvas course, aptly named Telling Your Story. By registering to the workshop, you should have been automatically given access to the course. Please reach out to our office if that is not the case. In the course, you will find links to this video, modules for each specific exercises with reading materials and reflection prompts, along with additional reading and podcast resources that are provided to support your own narrative writing. So let me welcome you again to the Tell Your Story workshop. We look forward to support you in developing a compelling story that highlights your journey of discovery and impact as a faculty and scholar. So let's start with a quick overview of today's plan. Why you? Why now? Well, you're probably all contemplating promotion, either now or coming up soon. Who's in the room, both in person or virtually? All faculty types are invited. The majority of you are facing your first major promotion and/or tenure review. What would you do and learn? Well, first, the specific components and requirements of the narratives in the promotion and tenure dossier. But most importantly, how to reflect on your own story based on reading successful narratives from your colleagues, reflection prompts and pair sharing with partners, and building the elements of your narratives. When will it happen? Well, the workshop itself will start with a panel of established academic leaders across multiple disciplines who will share their experience of reading promotion and tenure dossiers over the years. The added intent of this workshop, importantly, is to help you build connections and a community of peers with other faculty who can provide feedback to each other. So I encourage you to network, exchange contact information, and become each other's peer reviewers. Also, we provide a number of additional resources, some online, that will support your journey of story writing. The intent of this workshop is not to discuss the details of the promotion and tenure dossier. We have another workshop for that. Or how Interfolio works. The fundamental reason is to help you set the stage for a personal narrative that presents a fuller version of you and your work. This slide presents all the different narratives that go into your promotion and tenure dossier. Think of them as chapters of a unified story. Later on, we will be talking about the presence of a central character, you, and elements of storytelling you may want to consider. This slide here presents the architecture of that story. Please think of how each section complements the others, and together, how they tell that unified story. The biographical statement is included in the introduction. Start by listing your current appointment, including joint appointments, for example, if you're part of a discovery theme, your degrees, and professional positions you have held, including dates for each. You do not need to include a CV here. You'll have the opportunity to include one in the scholarship folder if you'd like to. For your biographical statement, this is your opportunity to introduce yourself and your work to all individuals who will be reading your dossier. You will include a narrative description of your educational background, how it led you to do the work that you're doing now. Offer brief summaries of your teaching, of your research, and service contributions. Please also identify your effort assignments. What is your role and responsibilities? How much do you teach in terms of percent time allocation? What is your responsibility towards research, if you have any, and towards service? Make sure you speak to your official responsibilities codified either in your unit's APT or your letter of appointment. This is the list of ingredients you need to consider to include in the recipe for an effective professional biographical statement. You could choose to list those in dry bullet form. However, what you want to achieve is a statement that elevates each component of your work into a whole, that summarizes your whole story. You're probably looking for something that looks like this. All of us know that there is a big difference between a recipe and the final product. And you all want your story to look like this, not like the original recipe in the previous slide. So visualize that story in that state. Walk away from the recipe and put it together as a full composite component and not just its elements. Your teaching narrative will consist of 3 different sections. Here on the slide, they are presented in chronological order as they appear in the promotion and tenure dossier. However, I recommend starting with a teaching statement, as it is the closest to a teaching philosophy with the identification of methods and assessment. Please think of these 3 elements as the anchoring pieces of your teaching statement. By identifying your goals, you can also answer some of the curriculum development you have achieved to reach those pedagogical goals. Identifying the methods you use or plan to adopt or adapt is a critical component of your teaching statement, as it points to the way you plan or achieve your goals. Finally, assessing the effectiveness of your pedagogical work beyond the information provided by students in SEIs is essential to demonstrate that you have achieved or not quite yet achieved those goals. You can expand on the assessment piece in the evaluation of teaching, particularly by pointing to markers of student success. For example, placement of graduate students, achievement of students on a credential important to a professional degree, publications by students demonstrating learning outcomes, etc. I strongly encourage you to take the workshop Creating Teaching Statements and Teaching Portfolios offered by the Drake Institute for Teaching and Learning. A session will be offered this spring in March. For your research and creative activity narrative, think a little along the same line in identifying the focus of your work, the approach you use to solve the questions you ask yourself, and make sure you also include their relevance to larger questions of either your field or societal issues, what you have accomplished, and your plans for the continuation of your work. In the quality indicators, start by understanding the criteria for promotion listed in your unit's APT document, along with the multiple evidence accepted to demonstrate attainment of the criteria for promotion. Map your narrative around the evidence that matters with respect to the criteria listed in your APT. With service, you again repeat the process with identifying your goals, maybe the approaches and level of engagement you use to support initiatives at different level of organization, department, university, profession, community. What are the indicators of impact for service in your field of work? Let's switch now to the how and why to tell your story. Let's start by identifying essential elements of a story. First and foremost, you need characters. In this story, you really need one character. You. Let me repeat that. You are at the center of this story. True stories are compelling, and this is definitely a true story. Second, acknowledge the journey. There's an evolution to your work, to you through that work, to how you understand how your students learn, how you grow, or even influence a field of study differently as you yourself change. What are the central events of your story? Has your story been completely linear, or have events shaped your discovery, offered opportunities that were unplanned, and thus created a reflection that you did not anticipate? I encourage you to listen to the podcast Tell Me Your Why, posted on Faculty Affairs website. Each faculty shares openly how events have shaped their career paths in ways they never anticipated. They are completely unscripted interviews, and yet you'll find a flow in the conversation that is so compelling because these individuals are telling their personal stories, clearly identifying themselves as a central character. Finally, I invite you to listen to a short story of a scholarship failure and redemption posted on our site. This is until now an untold story, which identified the successes in scholarship that came decades after some catastrophic, potential career-ending failures. You never know what you may salvage from your pile of discarded ideas. I know this is not fiction, though some of the work that some of you do does look like fiction to quite a few. Think of the journey and acknowledge the weight of some moments in your career. There's a fantastic example in the resources provided that identifies the struggle that a faculty faced in the first month of COVID, impacted their research in ways they could have never anticipated. The simple and clear enunciation of that struggle puts the work in perspective and allows us to connect with the scholar in better ways than any citation report could ever do. Okay, so what are you thinking? If you were to write a story about this gal, how would it go? What is she thinking? How did this happen? What happens next? How about this one? As a cyclist, my mind gets wild at imagining the few moments before this picture was taken. The point is that an event can generate a story or put an inflection in it. What are the events that define your story? How dramatic or enriching were they? How did they allow to frame your path or accelerate one you were already on? Don't forget the events of the journey because you were so focused on describing the destination. Okay, let's switch gear and talk about one of my favorite subjects, failure. I love this quote because it reframes the notion of failure as a voluntary approach to learning. We're all in the business of innovation, and you all know that innovation does not happen without failure. How you conceptualize, plan for, and communicate failure will have huge bearings on how you tell your story of success and how others see it and recognize it. Let me explain. There's a growing literature and set of resources that explore the benefits of failing and, more importantly, how to make a difference between right and wrong types of failures. I encourage you to listen to these podcasts. They are both entertaining and thought-provoking. If you have time, give Professor Edmondson's book a try to help you better conceptualize and utilize productive failures in your work. To understand concepts, I find it always helpful to simplify them to their essential elements. Innovation is such a central part of our work, one by which we're measured, recognized, and promoted. However, you may agree, or not, and that's fine, that there's no clear blueprint for what innovation means in most of our units. If it's so valued, wouldn't we benefit from having some sort of definition and clarification of how we measure it? So I came up with this very simplistic way to look at innovation. It may not work for you, but bear with me for a minute. Innovation index, for me, is the ratio of successes to failures. Unless you're an extraordinary individual, and we always meet a few once in a while, the majority of people will say that their failures is not zero. With that in mind, then our innovation index for most of us hovers somewhere between infinitely small, we're not very lucky at this, or quite large. Either we rarely fail, or we succeed at extraordinary rates. The fact that we will oscillate during our careers tell us when we take risks that pay off or not, and when we focused on things we already know how to do. Either way, own your failures. I am willing to bet that none of you has had failures that haven't yielded invaluable lessons. In the story that I share on our site, I show how it took almost 2 decades for me to reap the benefits of a pretty moral sapping and potential career-ending failure. You never know what will come out of these lessons. You want to keep a healthy balance in this ratio, which shows you are taking risks and putting yourself out there and that you are learning. Let's now talk about another area that for some of you will be important, the story of interdisciplinarity. When you work across fields, it's important for you to define what the vision of your integrated work is. This is a little akin to the goals in your teaching statement. What are you trying to achieve? How do you see the networks and interactions across multiple fields being pulled into your own work? Finally, define your work with the proper definitions. So let's look at definitions. Multidisciplinarity occurs when individual scholarly contributions are entirely separable in final products and can still be judged according to disciplinary norms, so the evaluation is still presumed to be objective and usually based on multiple disciplinary standards. Interdisciplinarity occurs when individual contributions are not easily separable from team projects, which cannot be evaluated according to disciplinary norms. So evaluations become more subjective and challenging. New languages are created for which there are no clear standard of excellence. One has to translate a great deal to identify impacts that are recognizable within established disciplinary boundaries. Transdisciplinarity occurs when individual contributions are not easily separable from team projects, which cannot be evaluated according to disciplinary norms. And academic scholarship mixes intentionally with non-academic knowledge. So peer review does not fully capture the scholar's contributions and impact. This work spans influence on policy, public-facing decision-making, community engagement, etc. Impact may be easier to point, but less so to measure with respect to established academic norms. In all this work, do not forget to identify your personal journey and the I in the interdisciplinary work. What are you bringing to the conversation and scholarly reflections in terms of methodology and approach that you have not considered before? Here are some elements you may want to consider to tell your story of interdisciplinarity. First, know your audience. Who are you talking to? Start with the disciplinary aspect or aspects of the work. Point to the additional contributions that were made to knowledge across one or more disciplines through this work. For example, engagement with external stakeholders, advancing solutions for complex problems. How does that cross or interdisciplinary research advance the disciplinary boundaries? Elevate the relevance through social benefits, translation, commercialization, community engagement. In short, demonstrate, when it's present, the benefits of transdisciplinarity. Here's a heat map of my own research publications in terms of disciplinary alignment. You can see that the breadth of my research as an environmental geochemist draws heavily in the earth sciences, biology, biogeochemistry, and physical STEM disciplines. What I was personally surprised to discover, but shouldn't have, is that some of my work plots in health sciences, toxicology and environmental exposure, social sciences, science education and policy, and humanities, philosophy of science. Not everyone will have access to such a visual representation, but you could talk about such a network in a narrative way. Where do you publish? If you do across journals that span different fields, make sure you highlight that as a measure of your success and present it as an intentional approach on your part. This is the end of the presentation. To get prepared for the workshop and be able to leave with drafts of your statements, please follow the guidance for the 3 exercises we will engage in during the workshop. Read the statement examples and take notes on the reflections, questions provided. Join us during the workshop and participate in the active learning exercises. Take notes to add to your portfolio that will help you complete your statements. And more importantly, make connections with other faculty to build peer evaluations partnerships. You will need those, you can help each other, and all of you will make your statements better. Thank you.